And I've spoken to this before. That is not, no one is talking about eliminating the debt ceiling or the debt limit. That's not what we're talking about right now. Congress is going to need to raise the debt limit without condition. So that is not what the discussion that we're having.
Very last thing, have White House officials been interviewed by the special counsel or by the Justice Department involving the classified documents?
So what I'll say from here is any questions that we may have about the review, about the process, I would refer you to the Department of Justice. I would also refer you to my colleagues over at the White House Counsel. I'm not going to get into any specifics from here. Go ahead, Mary.
Aside from the special counsel, aside from this review, I just have a question about process and classified documents and their handling, because I think there's some confusion amongst the public and even in this room. What is the process to make sure that classified documents aren't accidentally or intentionally taken when a president or vice president leaves office? What's the protocol, or is this sort of just a self-review system?
It's a good question. I would, on the process and how that works, I would certainly refer you to the White House Counsel's office. They would know that. They can walk you through that. My colleagues there, and I know many of you have been in touch with my colleagues in the last 24 hours, in direct touch, and answering many of your questions. So I would refer you to them on the specific process, so that they will certainly guide you in the right way.
But as far as you know, is it ever okay for classified documents to be mixed with personal evidence?
What I can say, look, what I can say is what the president has said before, what I have said multiple times. We take this very seriously. The president takes classified information, classified documents very seriously. But look, I've said this before. We have addressed this issue multiple times at length. And we have been fully cooperating with the Department of Justice, and now we will be doing the same with the Special Counsel's Office, just to be prudent here and just to make sure that we are consistent. I would refer you anything that is related to this, as it relates to the review, to the Department of Justice or my colleagues at the White House Counsel office. And we see it as the best way to move forward. We want to respect the process, and so that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to refer you to the Department of Justice.
Just to be clear, you're confident he followed whatever protocol was in place?
Again, this is something that he takes very seriously, the president, when it comes to classified documents, when it comes to classified information. I'm not going to go into any specifics from here. If you have any questions, anything further that's related to the review, or I will refer you to the Department of Justice or my colleagues over at the White House Counsel's office, who I know many of you who I'm staring at right now has been in close touch. Go ahead, Ed.
A few things, Karine, thank you. Following up on the State of the Union, I believe it was the President who suggested he has spoken with Speaker McCarthy. Are there any plans for them to meet in person before February?
Yeah, they spoke, and I think we actually shared that with all of you. The day that Speaker McCarthy became Speaker, you saw a statement from the President and the First Lady congratulating Kevin McCarthy becoming Speaker. And then the next day, I believe that was on a Friday. I believe the next day, which was a Saturday, the President had a direct conversation. He connected with Speaker McCarthy and congratulated him in person.
No plans yet for,
I don't have a plan. I don't have a scheduled meeting to share with you at this time.
I wanted to follow up on a few things from yesterday. When was the President informed about the Attorney General's decision to appoint a special counsel? How and by whom?
So, the specifics on that, here's what I can tell you. I can tell you that we were not giving a heads up. I was asked that question yesterday. We did not know that the announcement was going to come yesterday until after it happened, so I can clear the deck there and let you know. Anything else specific to when the President knew, or anything that's related to this, I would refer you to the White House Counsel's office. I know many of you that I'm looking at right now has been in close touch with my colleague there. And so I would continue to refer you to my colleague at the White House Counsel's office.
One of the things that they finally confirmed for us is that Bob Bauer is indeed the President's personal attorney handling some of this. Given that the Justice Department cited the personal counsel as having made this initial outreach to National Archives and has been in touch with the Justice Department, is that the person who these questions should be directed to? Why the White House Counsel?
I will say this again. Whatever the White House Counsel, my colleague told you in your conversation, I know you guys just spoke or connected earlier today, I would ask them that question, And anything related to the review, I would refer you to the Department of Justice.
And regarding the extraordinary measures that the Treasury Secretary announced a little while ago in advance notice to Congress, is there a policy that requires her to give advance notice of those plans?
You have to reach out to the Department of Treasury on how that process works. What I can say is, just so that everyone knows, folks who are watching, the debt limit is projected to be reached on Thursday, January 19th. At that point, Treasury will begin to take extraordinary measures to prevent default. Secretary Yellen did not name a specific X date, if you will. The day Treasury would no longer be able to pay the government's obligations. But quoting from the Secretary's letter, it's unlikely that cash and extraordinary measures will be exhausted before early June. But that does not mean that Congress should not wait until then to raise the debt ceiling, as we have been saying over and over again. The sooner Congress acts, the better, since even the prospect of not raising the debt ceiling will have damage the full faith and the credit of our nation. And again, we are going to continue to encourage Congress to act. But as far as the steps and how this all works, I would refer you to the Department of Treasury.
6 days till the 19th. A few years ago, she did it about 10 days before.
I understand. I would refer you to the Department of Treasury.
There's nothing to it being announced today amid the situation that the White House is facing.
I would refer you to Department of Treasury. And just to be very clear here, Ed, I've been in here almost every day since we got back from Mexico City, standing here taking your questions at length. So that we're not avoiding anything here, and
No,
you've heard from the president at least twice, and we have put forth multiple statements from the White House counsel's office. So that suggestion I just disagree with. Go ahead, Kristen.
Karine, thank you so much. Does the White House and does the president agree to fully cooperate with the special counsel investigation?
We have said that we are going to continue to fully cooperate. We have been. The president's lawyers and team has been fully cooperating with the Department of Justice, and they're certainly going to do that with the special counsel.
And so by that reasoning, would the president agree to sit for an on-the-record, in-person interview?
I'm not going to get into specifics or get ahead of what's going to happen. I'm not going to get into hypotheticals because that is a hypothetical. What I will say is we have addressed this multiple times at length, and we are going to continue, the president's team is going to continue to fully cooperate with the Department of Justice, and we respect that process, and that's what we're going to do.
The president has said he hopes to speak about this soon. When can people expect to hear from him about this?
Don't have, again, that is something that I don't have a magic wand here. I don't know when that's going to happen. What I can say is his team is going to fully cooperate with the Department of Justice. Let's not forget, the president said during the campaign that when it comes to the Department of Justice independence, he respects that. And that is something that he had said was incredibly important to make sure that they had their independence. That's why we say we're going to make sure that they have their independence, and that's why I'm saying that we're going to refer to Department of Justice.
And let me just ask you a big picture question here. Does the White House, broadly speaking, have an obligation to share not just with the National Archives, but with the American people when the existence of classified information is found in a private location?
Again, there is a process in this.
But just big picture, not necessarily
We-
in this instance, but is it the policy of the White House that they should share that information not just with the National Archives, but with the American people?
So I'll say this, Kristen. We have been transparent in the last couple of days. Remember, there's an ongoing process, and we have spoken when it is appropriate. And we have shared, again, I've been here almost every day, not every day, but from Wednesday, yesterday, and today, taking your questions on this. The White House counsel has put out a very extensive, multiple statements on this as well. And you all, I know, you all have been talking, many of you here have been talking to my colleague in the White House counsel. So what the actions that we took were right actions that his team took in dealing with the Department of Justice and also the archives. Look, I have.
You guys have answered questions when the press has broken in the news.
Because it's an ongoing process. Because, again, it is an ongoing process. There is a process here. The Department of Justice is independent. We respect that process. But again, I have taken questions. I can take two questions through 100 questions. I have answered your questions as almost every day on this issue. And again, anything else that you may have, anything that's related to the review, I would refer you to the Department of Justice.
One last question, because I know you've got to move on here. But the president campaigned on the argument that he would restore confidence. We know that he's in the process of deciding whether to officially announce he's running for re-election. Does this episode undercut that argument, that he would restore confidence? Because here we have in the headlines that he is now under investigation.
He's restored independence in the Department of Justice. That's what we're doing here. When we're saying we're going to refer you to the Department of Justice, that is restoring independence as it relates to issues like this. And that is important to the president. And it's been consistent. What I am saying about investigations has been consistent for the last 2 years. You've heard me over and over. Again, when it comes to a legal issue or a matter like this, we have always referred to the Department of Justice. So there's nothing here different here. We have said we wanted to restore the independence of the Department of Justice. That is what you're seeing. And again, this has been done in a transparent way when it relates to how this was dealt with the Department of Justice and the archives. The president takes this very, very seriously. Any other questions that you may have about this particular issue, about the review, I would refer you to the Department of Justice. You guys have been in touch with my colleagues at the White House Counsel Office, and I would suggest that you continue to reach out. Go ahead, Stephen.
Thanks. I just want to press you on that point about the idea of disclosures when it's appropriate. You describe a process, but it sort of feels like a strategy, a communication strategy to protect the president from political damage. Was it the hope and expectation here that this would have remained a private matter and not have been subject to public disclosure?
Look, Stephen, that's your version of the case. I've been very clear here, and I've answered that question multiple times in different versions, right, in the last couple of days. Look, want to be very clear. There's a process here. We are going to respect the process. This is all part of the Department of Justice process, and we are cooperating fully. We are cooperating fully in this process. And again, the president believes that the Justice Department and its independence needed to be restored. That's what you have seen under this administration the last 2 years, and I want to be consistent in what I'm saying. I want to be prudent in what I'm saying when I say that we are going to defer any questions related to this to the Department of Justice and any other items that you have. If you don't want to talk to the Department of Justice, you're free to talk to the White House Counsel Office. I know you guys have been in touch with my colleagues there.
We have done both, but let me just ask you, because oftentimes in the careers of White House press secretaries, there comes a time where they are asked, what they knew and when they knew it. Were you or any member of your staff involved in the crafting of the strategy as to when this disclosure should be made in advance of CBS News breaking the story on Monday evening?
No. Go ahead. Oh, did you have a question?
I did. Driving down the answer there. A couple of eco questions for you. Do you have a position on how high the debt limit should be raised?
I don't have a position on that. What I can say more broadly, what I'm saying is that more broadly speaking, not going to get into the specifics of that. What I can say is that we believe when it comes to the debt limit, it has been done in a bipartisan way over the years and decades, and it should be done in a bipartisan way, and it should be done without conditions. That is important here. And so we're going to continue to encourage and ask Congress to take action, and that's where we're going to leave it at this time. We're not going to do any negotiations, and it should be, again, done without conditions.
Calls to Congress and all? Is this a Ledge Affairs thing, or is it entirely up to Congress?
I've said that our Office of Ledge Affairs has been in touch with the new Congress to make sure that they know who to reach out, the appropriate people to reach out on the Office of Ledge Affairs. And so we're going to continue. We're always having conversations with members of Congress. The President always has multiple conversations with members of Congress. As you know, he has a lot of longtime friends who are over on the other side of Pennsylvania. And so that is something that continues. But when it comes to this, when it comes to the debt limit, it should be done without conditions. It was done under the last president 3 times in a bipartisan way, and so this should continue.
And very quickly on the CPI data yesterday, pretty good result there. That comes on the heels of the jobs data, which was pretty strong. Your officials have been kind of jazzed about that, it seems, on TV in the last 24 hours or so. Is it fair to say that the White House is thinking this is what a soft landing should look like, or are you not getting that far?
Look, what we can say.
Team soft landing.
Team soft landing. I'll say this, and as you said, you've heard from many of my colleagues who are who are economists who have been working on this issue, pushing forward the president's economic plan. Look, it just goes back to the president's economic plan, and we see it as it's working, right? With what the vision that the president has for this country. When you think about when he came in, he passed the American Rescue Plan. You think about all the other historic pieces of legislation, the bipartisan infrastructure legislation. I talked multiple times at the top about the Inflation Reduction Act. Look, it matters what the vision of a president is and him acting out on it, and that's what you saw. When you see inflation down for 6 months, that matters, right? That's because of the president's economic plan. When you see annual inflation down 6.5% from where it was this summer, just this summer at 9.1%, gas prices down by about more than $1.70 from its peak. All of that matters. And so that's how we're seeing this. We're seeing it as the president's economic plan is indeed working. We are going to continue to put the American families and American people first and work on this issue that you hear us talk about all the time. His number one economic issue is bringing down inflation. That's why the Inflation Reduction Act, what I talked about, when you think about healthcare, when you think about Medicare and negotiating those prices, when you think about what we announced in Georgia, 2,500 jobs are going to be created because of the Inflation Reduction Act. All of that matters, and all of that is important in its more broadly speaking about the president's economic plan. Look, we believe that we continue to be in this transition of stable and steady growth, and I think that's what we believe. That's what the numbers continue to show as you talk about the jobs report that we saw recently, and as we talk about the CPI data.
You're not calling it a soft landing.
I'm just saying that we are in this transition of a transition to stable and steady growth, and we believe that the president's economic policies that he's put forward in the past 2 years, we see that working. Go ahead, Frank.
Thanks. U.S. Attorney John Losh was looking into this for several weeks before. He was in touch with
Looking into what exactly?
the classified documents.
Okay.
He was in touch with President Biden's counsel. I wanted to know, was President Biden, was the White House surprised that along with Merrick Garland that they decided that more investigation was needed and a special counsel was appointed?
What I can tell you is that we were not given a heads up that Attorney General Garland was going to made his announcement yesterday on the special counsel. That is something that we learned, like many of you, watching the news. I'm not going to get into anything further from that. I can't speak to this person who you just mentioned who has been, I don't know, having conversations or making comments about this. I'm just not going to get into that. I'm not going to give reactions from here. What I can tell you is that, again, I'm going to refer you to the White House counsel and office to talk to my colleagues on any particular questions that you may have that's related to this process. And if it's something that you want to know specifically about the review, I will refer you to the Department of Justice.
When President Biden did say, God willing, he hoped to be able to say more soon. I mean, it seemed like he was thinking that the investigation would end soon. Was he surprised?
I'm just not going to go beyond what the president said. I will say this is that we are going to continue to fully cooperate. As I've said, we have talked about this at length. We've had multiple statements on this, and again, we want to be prudent here. I'm going to be consistent here. Any questions that you may have about this process, I would refer you to the White House counsel.
Another topic. I wanted to ask about the administration's appeal of the Sutherland Springs mass shooting case. Does it concern the administration that some gun control advocates are concerned or worried about the appeal by the DOJ and that appeal undercuts Biden's own stance on background checks? And actually also that the NRA is essentially applauding the DOJ's move?
So look, when it comes to issues like this, legal issues, that is something that the Department of Justice deals with. Again, they are independent. So I would refer you to them on their decision. The president continues to be committed on making sure that we address an issue that is affecting families across the country, communities across the country, which is gun violence. That's why it was so critical when he signed the bipartisan piece of legislation on gun violence just a couple of months ago, this past summer. And he's going to continue to call for the ban of assault weapons, working with Congress to make that happen. And let's not forget, the first year and a half of this administration, we put forward more executive actions than any other president on dealing with this issue, on dealing with protecting our communities, protecting families, dealing with gun violence, and that is that call that he has, especially the call to action from Congress, is going to continue and it's not going to stop. I'm going to go to the back. Yeah.
I have two questions on the